Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Andrea, and today we will be talking about retail, and not just retail, but retail and AIML together. And by the end of it, we'll be talking a bit about a business case that, together with Stefan, we debated a bit about. But before we get started, let's introduce ourselves. Stefan, thank you for taking the time for joining us. I
Thanks,
like your
Andrea.
dog, but
Yeah, I don't take photographs well, so I figured my dog is much more photogenic. Hi, Stephen Barnes, based in the U.S., and I am the director for the retail vertical for Canonical on the sales side.
thank you very much. I think your dog is very photogenic. I'll say that. Uh, my name is Andrea Munteanu. I'm based in Romania. I'm the MLOps product manager in Canonical, and I think together we'll have some fun today. I'll go a bit through the agenda. We'll be talking about retail industry, what are the challenges and opportunities around that, how AIML is maybe shaping the industry, and what are the main benefits. Then we'll move a bit towards a business use case, and then last but not least, we'll be talking about how and how MLOps and what tooling we could be using. Oh, this photo looks like old school. I remember when hypermarkets started to appear in Romania. So, Stefan, I'm curious, what's your thought on retail industry? Because I think you have much more experience than I do.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, it's been it's interesting, and I've been doing the retail vertical and Canonical for a little over a year now. I was working more in general and some of the other verticals before that, and one of the things that attracted me to the retail side is how rapidly technology is moving, especially in the post-COVID world, where brick and mortar and e-retailers kind of operated in separate worlds. Those worlds collided when COVID hit and required, and what's emerged from that is a much more blended and blurred architecture and landscape where the e-retailers are doing a lot more partnering with brick and mortars because they need to get to their customers. And brick and mortars are really embracing an omni-channel structure of of where they need to be able to reach their customers in any way, shape, or form they possibly can. So, and if you haven't heard of the term omnichannel, what omnichannel basically boils down to is you interact with your customers in any on whatever format and media they want, in any way they want, and deliver their products in any method they want. So that can be shopping in the stores, that can be shopping online and do in-store pickup, that can do shopping in store and then have it delivered to their house. And with that comes a multitude of data and data points and analytical data that can help the retailers fine tune their operations, their marketing, and their products and services to give their customers the best experience possible, the best present them with the products that most likely they want to purchase, and then give them the opportunities to interact and get those products in the way that best meets their needs at the time. So the thing about these transformations is the current architecture, the architecture, the prior to 2020, 2021s, they were a lot of shrinkage going down the edge, not as much about, they were starting to look at basket analysis and things that you're going to talk about. But the idea of understanding a customer and then understand demographically representing a customer in data and then making predictions and decisions based on that is a new trend and phenomena. It's driving a lot of technologies decisions at all levels, including putting where the store compute was being downgraded and downsized to where now it's being upgraded because you have edge processing and edge decisions that need to be made prior to going to the cloud. It also is looking for new automations and new technologies that's going to be able to interpret data and turn large amounts of data into actionable decisions that can result in either lower cost, a better experience, or higher revenues for the customer, for the retailers. then lastly is that data then blurs the line between an retailer and a brick and mortar, to where we're starting to see a lot of bleed over, and we talk about that later as well. So it's a fascinating time. The area that we're specifically addressing here, which is the AIML and the business intelligence, is an area that a lot of the retailers are starting down the path, but may not be aware of all the technologies and the advances that have been made by companies like Canonical that can make that path shorten the length to adoption and increase the value of what they get out of it. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'm excited about having these conversations continue with the with the retailers that are seeing what we're doing with these technologies and where we're going. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. And before we even move further, I'll just ask one question. Is the customer at the heart of any retailer?
Is the customer the customer is at the heart of the retailer, but one of the things that's really changing the dynamics is the retailers had to take data, like they look at sales, they looked at gross sales, they ended up looking at how advertising worked, how things worked on a broad demographic basis. And then they had to make our decisions on the next type of products, the layouts of the stores, things like that. What's happening with this new trend is you can take assumptions and guesses like we're showing here, but we can actually now apply it to individual customers. Whenever they're shopping, they have their loyalty cards. They are making purchases, and when they're purchasing products A, B, and C together, D and E are usually followed along by 30% of the customers. Those products, then we may want to start advertising to products that are buying A, B, and C, because obviously there's a connective trend for those customers. That then moves into the omni-channel and the other side. So where it was more looking at macro data and then making decisions on a macro basis, retailers are now looking at with a laser pointer into stores, demographics, time of day, supply chain, and being able to tune those with much greater accuracy. Again, ultimately giving the customers the best experience. And again, that's the key thing, is when the customers get a good experience, they're going to want to return, they're going to want to buy more. It will raise, it'll raise revenues, it'll raise operations, it'll raise economies of scale. And that's why this is so important. But it's impossible to do by hand like they used to do with macro. It has to be automated within the systems.
You're right here. And there are a few things that I would like actually to add here, because you did mention them maybe briefly. On one hand, I think that rather than just selling, retailers nowadays do focus on experiences for their customers. And then also one thing that they did improve and they changed a lot is their tracking system. So nowadays they do have data that they can actually use in order to better understand their customers, to better optimize their operations, to work better, such that they offer a better experience, right?
Exactly.
And looking here, what they've learned doing over time is to make data-driven decisions. And that's what it led, and it helped a very competitive industry such as retail to actually keep evolving. And it helped retailers to stay available on the market. So they went from just assumptions and guesses, as you already mentioned, all the way down to business intelligence, and they pushed the limit of it. I worked before for retailers actually, and that's what I was playing with. I was playing and actually struggling with business intelligence tools such as Click or Tableau, because they are great, they work incredibly, but when you want to do predictions, for example, you struggle. They're not designed for that. That was not their initial purpose. So what's next? That might be an exciting question that we want to answer very quickly. And what I would say is that AIML is shaping the industry. What machine learning brings is a lot of room for retailers, or a playground, actually, I would rather say, for them to play with the data that they are gathering in order to better understand their customers, to better understand how and where they can save money and where they can optimize it can be on one hand to design better loyalty programs, of course, and that's maybe the first thing that you think of, but it's also about inventory management. It's about personalized employees planning. But before we move there, let's go back a bit around the impact that actually AIML has in the industry, and I'll hand it back to you, Stefan, because you liked it, and I think you have much more experience than I do.
And I really like this graphic that was from Prescient that they put together, and I think it's if I could make it animated, I would, in the sense that the e-retail industry, you know, the online only companies have done individualized marketing for a decade now, because when a customer logged in, they were able to start creating that description of the customer, where brick and mortar didn't have those advantages in the initial side, because they didn't have that ability to require a personalized login whenever you walked into a store. Those are starting to change now in the sense of the loyalty programs, but also when they're associating with other data points that they get from customers, like their payment methods and things like that. Secondly, is with omni-channel happening, now they're starting to bring more understanding to the customers' buying and acceptance habits of products. So the investment in AI on the right hand chart, if we were looking at over time, and specifically over the last few years, we would have seen that going from that first white line, and I think at or beyond the second white line, as it's trending to a higher impact going forward. And more importantly, is for the brick and mortar retailers to survive and thrive going forward into the 2020s, they're going to need this type of individualized experience that customers are already getting from the online retailers. And so the impact of it is twofold. First of all, keeping the customers loyal to you and your brand and your ability. Secondly, as I mentioned before, starting to understand product groupings. When you go to products A, B, and C, there's 40% of customers want to buy D. You may want to suggest that to them, and that can be done in store kiosk. It can be done on their shopping app. It can be done if their online experience to go to the store. Those are things that are going to increase the value per customer interaction. And then then all those things increase customer loyalty, which kind of feeds everything else to it. So we're seeing this chart where the e-retail industry is already have kind of ahead of the curve. This is where brick and mortar can catch up and really, you know, create a multiples of value for what they spend on AI.
Thank you for that. I'm curious now, actually, who do you think would benefit more from AI, the brick and mortar traditional retailers or the e-commerce ones?
Well, I think the e-commerce has already, I mean, obviously, as it gets more and more complex and neural learning happens and things, you know, the online industry is already moved heavily there. The brick and mortar hasn't been able to take advantage of it. So when it comes into seeing the impact of the adoption, I think the brick and mortar in investments now will see a much more demonstrable and you know, tangible response for whenever they start doing AI, because they're going to start creating that more intimate relationship with the customers, which will create a higher value customer across the board. Where right now they're trying to do more of a broad-based, here's my products on the shelves, here's my broad-based advertising, here's my broad-based solutions. And when they go individualized, they should be able to increase the value. So I really think the brick and mortars over the next 5 years are going to see a much bigger return on investment, because it's a newer way to exploit the relationship they already have with the customer.
I agree with you. I do think, I mean, maybe I'm the pessimistic one. It comes to time. Maybe it's because I'm from Eastern Europe, but I think the traditional retailers will struggle a bit more, because I maybe it's my assumption, but they didn't value that much how they track their data. So it might be that it's not that clean. And therefore, their return on investment will be very high once they figure it out the recipe to scale their AI initiatives, actually.
Yeah. Well, there's one other thing, and I agree with you 100% in that assessment. There's one other thing, that trend that's happening is, I mentioned it before, the monetization of the edge. So, for example, self-shopping kiosk, and just putting in kiosks that can do certain interactions. If you're in a department store where you can click on a button and see clothes that are on you, and then select one and it tells you where it is to go put it into your cart. Smart edge, point of sale devices, other types of things that are coming into the edge, and that requires an edge compute that has a lot more processing, GPU enabled, to be able to pre-process video data, to be able to feed data in and out of all these devices on an individualized basis. That transformation is happening across the board, right now and over the next couple of years. That's going to create an entirely new lake of data for the AI to process. So I agree with you. Right now, the data that they've got is, although it's good in a lot of cases, loyalty program data and stuff, it's a fraction of what they're going to have from quality and depth wise 18 to 24 months from now. And I think that, the combination of the getting more data points plus implementing things like we're talking about here, the brick and mortars will see, an explosion of value come out of it. But until they get better quality of data, I agree with you. Not necessarily garbage in, but if you have unrefined data in, you're going to get unrefined results out of the backside.
You're right here, and maybe I think we touched upon all these benefits a bit, but maybe it's worth rephrasing them again. And whereas we talked about loyalty programs and personalized customer experiences, it's on the e-commerce side, it's quite easy, and we all observe them when we get recommendations of products based on what we buy, for example. How do we translate that for brick and mortar solutions? It's maybe where we go to optimize product localization. At the end of the snacks area in the store, what do you place? Do you place sweets or do you place beverages? It was one of the main questions that retailers had a few years back, and I would be curious if they solved it or now. But even more than that, AI can help improve customer satisfaction because it it makes them feel that it's an experience that is designed for them rather than just a place where you go, you buy, and then you leave. And from an operational perspective, because that's important as well, even if maybe it's not so often talked about, improving forecasting, knowing or bearing in mind that there are different bank holidays, there are different events, there are high seasons and low seasons for different products, as well as reducing costs of operations because of that. It's very important. And last but not least, better planning how your personal works, how your employees are placed around the market, how many cash stores, not stores, cashier things you have open. It's essential, and that's how AIML can help any retailer, to be honest.
Yeah, and
Would
that
you
is,
add something
it's
else,
very
Pierre?
interesting what you're saying about that. There's two things, is operationally, because retail is a tight margin business, and how efficient you run it. And for example, anticipating when flows of customers are going to come in based on sometimes very diffuse events that aren't quite as easy. Hey, there's a home game at the stadium, and every time there's a home game, we have this flux of people afterwards. Let's always make sure that when we check on the home games, if there's a home game that we're typically going to win, we see 20% more spending. So if our team is picked to lose by 40, then let's not worry about it because we won't see it. I mean, little data points like that, and that was a ridiculous example, but that are not necessarily obvious to human eyes, the machines pick up if they're programmed correctly, and can really make. I mean, if you have 50 people working to stand at cash registers when you need 10, then you're spending a lot of extra money you don't need. If you have 10 people working register when you need 50, you're getting either a terrible customer experience or you're losing revenue because people just leave. So those type of little things can really massively impact the profitability of an individual store. And some of those are geographically localized and some of them are generic. Right now, most of their models have to be generic because they just can't process the geographic localized data. So
And
that's
this
where
comes
things come in.
back to, I'll jump upon it because I forget I'll say it, but this comes upon another interesting fact that influences a lot the retailers, and it's the cultural background. There is a very high tendency of assuming that, for example, everywhere in Europe, the patterns are the same or the expectations are the same. But that's not completely true because culturally, the East and the West expects very different things. They have different patterns. And when I was working with retailers, then that was one of the very interesting findings that I found that from products that we usually buy all the way down to what we care about in a store, it's completely different from a cultural perspective. And I would assume it's the same in the US, even if
Yeah,
it's just
very
one
much so.
country.
And
It's so diverse.
geographically, I mean, just one example of the one state I grew up in, Louisiana. It's very stratified. In the southern part is the religious area of there. During Lent season, you don't eat meat, so none of the grocery stores stock a lot of as much meat for the weekends because every Friday they only ate seafood, but they bought a lot of shrimp. So understanding that, hey, during these 3 months you're going to have this kind of a spike in seafood because of the cultural, religious or whatever beliefs in the area. Those are subtleties, but the local stores did it, but the national chains didn't quite get some of the trends that affected the areas. And you weren't going to sell a lot of pepperoni pizzas on a Friday night during that period, but a lot of shrimp pizzas got sold, which shrimp pizzas got sold nowhere else in the country. So it's interesting. Those points, again, machines sometimes do a much better job of just, it takes away the human bias and just looks at the raw data and lets the data tell the story. And then the machine learning, I think you're going to talk about, really helps with that, where data scientists can feed it in, but then the machine can take it over and find some correlations that may have been missed. So yeah.
And because you touched upon data, maybe it's worth mentioning about it because historically, what retailers did was to look at the sales data very closely, and that was great. I think it helped them stay competitive on the market. It helped them develop, as I already said. But there is much more data than that. That at the moment it's becoming of interest for a lot of companies. On one hand, it's inventory data that maybe it has been analyzed in the past, but more than that, you can look at surveillance cameras and you can analyze patterns. For example, how customers walk in the store. Once they enter, do they take usually left or right? Do they go for the toys or do they go for the electronics? And it's very often that I've seen recently that actually a lot of hypermarkets are rearranging their stores and are trying different strategies because of that. And after that, it's easy to figure it out that the product placement plays a very important role. And I've seen various strategies in some stores. You see toys at the beginning because retailers assume that there are going to be kids that enter it. In some others, it's holidays. Products that are really at the entrance. But what is actually working better? How how they should be placed? First of all, at an horizontal level, but then also at a vertical level. What's at eyes level? What's above and what's below? What's at the beginning of the shelf and what's at the end of the shelf? These are all questions that can easily be answered with AML and with modeling, as well as promotions. Um, there are some traditional ones, depending on the country and background. You always buy Coca-Cola with chips or beverages in general with chips. But what else can you buy? And I remember when I was doing analysis on that, found out so many interesting associations of products. And last but not least, we already talked about employees placement. And this is a new type of data that I think it's very little analyzed, and from experience, it's not yet very well tracked. It's something that it's an area that can definitely be improved.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
It's interesting. And one of the type of data I'll just throw in there, that's it's not really in the sales side, but also in operations. We're finding that there's other things that there's sensors and other things that are being monitored that can do predictive things. For example, in one company I've worked with, they were looking at the power fluctuations in their freezers and noticed that when they started seeing certain levels of fluctuation over time, those freezers would fail within 30 days of those fluctuations happening. So they fed those they just fed the readers into a meter, and when they started seeing this result, they would send a tech out to work on that freezer, save tons of money in spoilage, and lost food because they were able to anticipate something based on data they already had. So again, as the data lake grows, they may find additional, either like I said, cost savings or sales increase that they weren't even aware that the data was going to provide them. So this is another area of why the data collection and processing is so important, because it'll give the data scientists ability to really kind of do correlations in ways that'll just make the business more efficient. So anyway, didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted, it was an interesting solution that came out of this that was initially not even anticipated. So
No, that's good, and that's interesting. I mean, already, I want it to be a conversation, and that's why I invite everyone to ask your questions. I realize I never said it for the last 26 minutes, but you can ask your questions, and at the end of it, if we still have time left, we'll happily answer them. If not, we'll come back to you. I'll put the responsibility on Stefan to contact you back with answers. And because we also promised a business case, we thought of market basket analysis because it leads towards the idea of offering customer experiences. And what market basket analysis does is actually analyzing pattern of how customers are buying products, or patterns of co-occurrence of different products purchased together. It has been around, I would say, for quite a while. Initially, it started a bit slower with what I would call descriptive analysis, which was really an analysis of the basket itself. What products the customer buy, and that was it, right? It was based on historical data, and it was not necessarily that actionable at the beginning. However, the industry moved forward, right? And what we built was predictive market analysis, which however works a bit in reverse from what you would expect, because it analyzes what you already bought, and then it predicts what you're going to buy next. It uses machine learning models, and it's very often met already in the e-commerce side of retail industry, but not that much on the brick and mortar side. And last but not least, we talk about differential market basket analysis, which, as the name might suggest, is actually what differentiates you as a retailer on the market. What from your experience makes it better? Is it the packaging? Is it the delivery time? Or it might be the purchase history, because you became a loyal customer that only buys during the winter or during sales. I don't know. That's what differential market basket analysis does. And what, at the end of the day, this uh, use case is it's a conditional construction. If you buy now, then based on your patterns, of course, if you buy tomatoes, then you will also buy cucumbers, because you're very likely to make a salad. And that sounds like a basic example, but what it aims to do is it aims to better understand retailers' customers, and what are the patterns that are not that obvious. What are the patterns that were not guessed already? Because retailers spend a lot of time trying to guess or trying to analyze the sales data, as we said before. But there is much more than that they can do, and that's what we suggest now. And when it comes to metrics that they actually can use, we definitely suggest support, which is basically the frequency of a product being met with another product in the same basket. It is divided by the number of, like, from a mathematical perspective, it is divided by the number of transactions where those two products are being found, and then the confidence is the ratio between the two products that are being bought together. And last but not least, the least one is the confidence, the division between confidence and support. Um, Here, these are the three metrics that are used to measure actually the success of a machine learning model that talks about market basket analysis. And whereas it starts with data scientists coding around this, machine learning aims to automate things, right? It aims to predict, and based on the patterns that it finds, it keeps evolving, and it keeps modifying its values and its results based on it.
So can I ask you a
So,
question on that, real quick?
of course, you
So
can.
would the AI ML systems that we're talking about here be able to just start looking through and combing through all the data and making those correlations? And again, like you said, it could be very strange. If a customer bought tomatoes and bought skewers, they also tended to buy toilet paper. Things
Yes.
that you wouldn't really associate, but could say 90% of the time when they bought these two things, this third thing was there, and would probably do an upsell. Would it be able to comb through and discover that, or does the data scientist has to predefine questions? How much self learning is available today in the systems?
There is a lot of self-learning available in the systems. Of course, you have to have someone that kickstarts this process and defines some initial rules at the beginning. But the system goes through all the data sets or through all the data that's available for learning. And then based on that, it adjusts. So whereas, I don't know, I will say that the data scientist lives with the assumption that if you buy tomatoes, you buy cucumbers. So he knows, the system knows that there is a rule with if and then at the end of the day, it's gonna give you all the constructions that are similar to this and based on their frequency, right?
Got it.
And then
Okay.
even further, but you can move even further and you can say, don't stop at just two products. Tell me all of them. So you might discover that there are actually patterns with 5 products. On every Friday night, you always buy chips, beverages, and chocolate. I'm not very creative. This is very common. And then, except for that, you also buy paper towels because you are having barbecues. I don't know. So it learns by itself and then
Yeah.
it evolves by itself. That's the main idea, right? It starts with something and then at the end of the day, you do need some math for any machine learning models. You do need some metrics to measure its performance. And what these metrics can be used for is to measure the performance or the accuracy of the model to make sure that it actually tells you something that is relevant for you as a retailer in this case.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And then in order to make all these things real, you do need something, right? Because I remember at some point someone described me AIML as a Pandora box because they didn't know how to implement it or how to make it real. And that's where MLOps comes in place. And if you wonder what MLOps is, it's basically a set of practices that aims to deploy and maintain machine learning models in production in a reliable and efficient way. So the way that I often describe it is DevOps, but for machine learning models. And it has two parts. It has the machine learning part that we've been talking a lot about, and then it has the operational part because at the end of any machine learning project or initiatives, you end up having a machine learning model that you want to deploy back in production. You want to deploy it uh, to the retailers such that they do see benefit from it and they act based on those learnings. So except for the fact that you deploy it, you need to monitor it because you will have different versions that end up being deployed and you want to see if something gets affected. If the model itself stops working at some point, such that instead of paralyzing the whole retail chain, you have visibility on that and you stay on top of the operations of everything that happens there. And why it is important to have MLOps for retailers? Well, for me, out of all these things, is faster delivery. As I have a data science background, and as a data scientist, you spend most of your time doing anything else than data science. you look for data sources, you try to understand them, you clean them, you plug and play tools. So having a one stop where you know you can do all your job and you don't have to spend time on these operational activities, but rather spend time on what you care about, which is data science. You want to code models that you deliver, and then you feel that they actually bring value back to the table. Some of them might not be that useful, right? Because they're just experiments and you fail or you drop them, but you drop them quick. You don't spend 6 months until you realize that something is not working just because you spent 4 months out of those six play trying to figure it out things about your data. You
Right.
spend 2 months and that's it. And then it has user management, and you do need that because we already mentioned that retailers benefit from big amounts of data, which leads very likely to bigger teams of data scientists. So they do need to work together, and they do need to work securely. They automate. So once you have an experiment that you're happy with and you want to deploy the model to production, you can do everything in one tool. You let it there, it stays in the production, and you don't have to worry about it. The system sends you alerts if it fails, and you're very happy with it. And a very important thing that I've learned while working as a product manager, I didn't consider it that much before. It's the ability to run on hybrid and multi-cloud environments. That's essential. You don't want all the data to be on the public cloud, but you might want to experiment there because it's quicker, right? So these are six of the reasons that I could find or I could easily think for retailers to think and to start using MLOps for the AML initiatives. But I would be curious if you have more than that.
No, yeah, I think you've hit, yeah, and from my perspective, I think you've hit all the key ones. And I think, um, I think that your hybrid multi-cloud environment thing is actually a really important point. I think we mentioned before that they're actually going to have AIML decisions made at all the way down from the edge retail up to the public cloud, and having private cloud intermediate points, because you can't take all the raw video data that's starting to be produced at the edge, and that can't be, there's not enough pipe to get that up into any kind of hybrid cloud. Those all have to be processed locally. And from the data science perspective, what data is important from that video feed that needs to be captured, structured, and then sent up? That's some of the art that's involved with this. But and all the, you hit all the key things, and I think again this all falls underneath what we've seen in the omni-channel trends as well on the market, on the retail side.
And then I'm also being conscious of the time, but I'll move a bit towards the life cycle of a machine learning project, because first you have to fetch the data, and retailers here have a huge benefit. They already have the data, they do capture data, and you have to bear in mind that that's not something that it's happening in all industries, but it is essential for the success of any ML project. Then you start engineering the features and you start extracting what is relevant. As you already said, Stefan, not all the data is important, and not the all the videos that are being recorded are essential. So just extracting the essential ones, it's very important. Then you start experimenting, and that's this, like the third arrow is the fun one for data scientists. They start training and testing models. It's worth mentioning that they do, it's very likely that they will have to train more than once, and it is very time consuming. So using an MLOps platform that supports, for example, live patching is essential, because if you train for 3 months and then the system just reboots, it's a waste of time for you. You have to protect yourself and to protect your data. Last but not least, you store your model, and then before you even deploy the model to production, you start analyzing all the models that have been developed and choose the one that performs the best. After that, you deploy to production, and even if it does not appear here, it's worth mentioning that this whole cycle is actually a loop. You don't deploy a model to production once and then you forget about it. You deploy a model to production, and then you keep capturing data from the stores in this case and keep retraining and experimenting, such that your models stay up to date with your customers and with the trends that are being influenced by the way that you operate because of AI. So what is Charm Kubeflow? Well, before we even start, before we even get to Charm Kubeflow, I'll start with AIML because that's what we've been talking about, and then we moved a bit to MLOps, which is how you can actually have AIML projects running. And what Charm Kubeflow is, it's an open source end-to-end machine learning operation tool that allows you to do machine learning lifecycle. So allows you to do everything that I've discussed a bit before in one tool. And it is essential for data scientists to stop trying to plug and play with different tools, but have one stop that they know they can play with everything. They can experiment there, they can deploy to production there, they can bring their data there, and they know they can do it on a private cloud, they can do it on a public cloud, or they can do it in hybrid cloud scenarios if that's needed. So shortly, Kubeflow translates actually data science workloads into Kubernetes jobs. It's a cloud native application. It runs on any Kubernetes, and it allows data scientists, machine learning engineers to actually do their job efficiently and reliably. So here's just the example. It just showcases what I've mentioned a bit before. It runs on any cloud, as I already said before. But maybe there are two important things. On one hand, is that we allow machine learning workloads to run securely. We offer security patches, upgrade, and updates. Um, and if you've never thought about it, you have to bear in mind that whenever you use a certain library that, I know, let's say TensorFlow, you end up having around 100 packages that are being used, and that can easily be vulnerabilities in your machine learning project if you don't bear in mind that you can actually run machine learning workloads securely. So, as I already said before, it's an open source project, and we are very proud of it.
Hey,
Um,
Andrea, can I
yes.
interject one thing? If you go back to the previous slide, I think is just something that's for Kubernetes, since you mentioned it here, I think it's something that's a subtlety that a lot of people don't get with Kubernetes is technology that allows you to orchestrate and run containers, microservices, things. Again, the pieces of AIML that we're talking about. The great thing about Kubernetes is it's very good at running ephemeral jobs and things that are going to be there for a while and taken away, and being able to expand and contract based on need. Kubernetes is not as good at locking down resource availability. So when you're running a lot of AML jobs or a lot of different jobs for different groups, uh, they can consume one job can consume resources and starve away another job. One of the things that Kubeflow solves is it guarantees resource slotting for your AIML processes, and has those embedded into the standards that are built to it. So you're all the data scientists working on this know that when they run their processes, they're not going to get choked out by another user that's or a system that's not being policed well. And it's a subtle point, but when it comes to predictively knowing that I'm going to start my process and a day later I'm going to have a result, Kubeflow is very, very good at making sure that those predictive results, performance wise, from what you're expecting from your machines, are achieved both in the public and private cloud. So I just wanted to make that point in the sense of Kubeflow is doing all the stuff you're saying, but it's also doing some of the scaffolding and stuff underneath the hood that really makes sure that one person isn't excited because they got things done twice as fast, whether a neighbor next door is still waiting for their process to start because it all got choked out, which happens a lot in unregulated systems. So just wanted to make that the subtle point, but it's something that people consider when they start adopting Kubernetes for these type of operations.
Thank you for adding that, and you're right. I left with the assumption that people know what Kubernetes is. And I won't make this mistake here because I very often get asked about what's the difference between Kubeflow and the Upstream project, because as I already said before, we're an open source project and we're very proud of it. And we care about the community we care about the Kubeflow community, we care about the open source project. And to be fair, there are differences. First of all, we do have a commercial offering. We offer support and managed services for Charm Kubeflow, and for a lot of companies, this is essential. In case you don't want to bother as an enterprise with the administrative or operational tasks of Kubeflow, and you just want to have data scientists coding day in day out and delivering models, then you might care about a managed offering. But from a technical perspective, Churn Kubeflow runs on supported versions of Kubernetes 123 and 124. And last but not least, what we care about is actually an MLOps ecosystem. We don't believe in only one tool, but what we do believe in is an MLOps ecosystem where Churn Kubeflow integrates with other applications. For example, Spark, MLflow, Seldon, or Kafka are the ones that we already integrated with, but we keep working on that depending on customer needs, on requests, or what we see as being trending on the market. And I have here at the bottom trainings and workshops, because what I've learned is that AIML has been around for a very long time, much longer than I was. But all this hype is in the last 5-7 years. And there is definitely a shortage when it comes to AI skills. So offering trainings and workshops that help enterprises get started with their project is something that we do want and we do care about. There's no out of the box solution for AI projects. So what we do is we talk to them and we personalize the experience based on their needs. And that's where I'm almost reaching the end. And get started on your AIML journey is a call to action, because I think that I have retail experience. I never said it, or maybe I said it before here, but I've worked in retail before, and I found it a fascinating world with a lot of data and a lot of potential, but at the same time, a lot of challenges because of the large volumes of data, because of the diversity. When you think of a hypermarket chain, you realize that they have different sizes, they're located in different countries, and all these things influence the way that the store operates. However, caring about their customers and putting the customers at the heart of any at the heart of any retailer is the way that actually you end up considering AIML. And whereas products are maybe the one that I'm about to suggest, yeah, you can use Charm Kubeflow. Services are the ones that actually help you get started. It's about training people and training and helping enterprises understand what is actually their need and their actual use case. Is there anything else that you would like to add here, Stefan?
Yeah, and I think that the key thing is that, and and by the way, we've kind of run a little bit over. So for the questions that we've got in, we will definitely respond to those offline. And if anybody has any questions, please put them in to the queue or contact us, after this webinar. But I think the key thing is where do retailers and data scientists want to spend their time? They want to spend their time trying to tinker with and build little systems, or they want to spend their time analyzing data and getting actionable results. What we've done with Charm Kubeflow and the work we've done with AIML is to have professional services, expertise, and automation available to make sure that your AIML processes, the engine behind it is rock solid, is working, can access all kind of data, and then the data scientists are focusing, as you said before, building the models, looking at the results, tuning them, and getting them into production so the retailers can get the benefits of them. So that's where the capabilities that we bring to the table can really, even if you're where you are in your journey, I think you'll find that we can help accelerate the process and lower the cost to get your AIML that much further, so the benefits start coming down the pipe. And if anybody has any questions or wants any more details, feel free to reach out to either myself or Andrea. We'd be very happy to have a further conversation and discuss any more details. And again, one last thing I'll say, turn it back over to Andrea. Thank you very much for the time. If you made it through listening to us yammer on for 50 minutes, God bless you. And appreciate the time on this. And as you can tell, we're very passionate about AI ML in retail, and would very much look forward to working with you further on this. Andre?
Thank you very much for that. I think that's a wrap. We ran way over time. I think we like talking too much, and we do like the topic. As Stefan said, drop us an email, contact us. Don't forget to share your feedback at the end of it, because we do want to learn more and maybe come up with topics that are helping you even more. And I think I'll see you around next time, right?
Thanks again. Have a good day,
Have a
everyone.
good day. Bye bye.